What if the woman who taught millions of Americans to put dinner on the table in under 30 minutes had a life behind the camera that was louder, messier, and far more complicated than anything she ever cooked up in that kitchen? And what if the person most responsible for making food feel approachable and joyful was simultaneously surviving fires, hurricanes, tabloid attacks on her marriage, feuds with culinary royalty, and daily screaming matches with the man she loved? That is the story of Rachael Ray, not the polished daytime version, but the real one, the kind that starts in a small town in upstate New York and travels through heartbreak, loyalty, loss, and a love story that most people would never understand, but that has outlasted almost everything else in her life. Rachael Dominica Ray entered the world on August 25, 1968, born to Elsa Providenza Scuderi and James Claude Ray in Glen Falls, New York. And her background alone explains a lot about the layered, hard-to-categorize personality she carried into adulthood. Her father's lineage ran French, Scottish, and Welsh, while her mother brought Sicilian roots into the mix, and the combination produced someone who genuinely contained multitudes from the start. When Rachael turned 8, the family relocated to Lake George, a move that quietly shaped everything that followed. Her mother Elsa ran restaurants throughout New York's Capital District, including a Howard Johnson's near the old Gaslight Village amusement park, and growing up inside that rhythm of food, service, and constant motion gave Rachael an education she never once had to sit down for. Sutton's Marketplace in Queensbury is where a teenage Rachael first showed her instincts, working the floor and volunteering to appear in commercials for the company without anyone having to ask her twice. She never stopped talking about that place over the years, particularly the grilled raisin bread and cider donuts that she named among her favorites. After graduating from Lake George High School, she spent months saving money and planning her escape to New York City. And by 1995, she had made the leap, landing behind the candy counter at Macy's Marketplace. The job worked well enough until the store started loading her down with responsibilities that had never been discussed when she was hired. And that was all the signal she needed to walk away and find something else. Agata and Valentina, a specialty food store in the city, became her next stop, and for a while, New York felt like it might finally deliver on its promise. It didn't. After a year of working and waiting without a single meaningful step toward the stardom she was quietly chasing, Rachael did something that must have stung in the moment. She packed up and went home. Back to Lake George. Back to the people and places she thought she had left behind, and none of that felt like progress at the time. What she couldn't have known was that going home would become the most consequential decision of her career. By 1996, she was back in Lake George, managing Mr. Brown's Pub at the Sagamore Hotel, a property that sat right on the lake, and the work was grounding, even if it wasn't glamorous. That changed when she moved into a buying role at Cowan and Lobel, a gourmet market in Albany. And it was there, surrounded by specialty ingredients and customers who were genuinely afraid of their own kitchens, that the idea took shape. A large portion of the people who walked into that store had already decided cooking wasn't for them, either because they had failed before or because they had convinced themselves failure was inevitable. And Rachael looked at that fear and decided to dismantle it. She built a course she called 30-Minute Meals, stood in front of ordinary people who were nervous about onions and olive oil, and showed them how to feed themselves and their families without turning the whole experience into a crisis. The response came fast. Local CBS affiliate WRGB brought her in for a weekly segment on their newscasts. A public radio appearance followed, and her first book, also called 30-Minute Meals, landed in stores carrying simple recipes that treated the reader as a capable adult rather than a culinary student. Food Network came calling in 2001 with a contract, and from 2002 through 2005, she hosted $40 a day across 77 episodes, traveling city to city and attempting to eat 3 real meals a day on $20, which made for genuinely compelling television. The show turned her from a cooking instructor into a full television personality. And then, in 2005, the same year that show wrapped, Rachael Ray married her attorney, John Cusimano. Before getting into the details of that marriage and the revelations she has been dropping about it recently, the criticism needs its own space. Because Rachael Ray's career never existed without it, and the resistance she faced shaped her story just as much as the success did. The very thing that made her famous, fast, uncomplicated cooking that treated 30 minutes as a hard ceiling, was also the thing that made certain corners of the culinary world dismiss her outright. Critics pointed out that her timeline skipped preparation entirely, as though every ingredient would arrive pre-chopped and ready to go. Anthony Bourdain was openly critical of her approach for years. Giada De Laurentiis and Emeril Lagasse both kept public distance from her at various points, though Lagasse eventually built what appears to be a genuine friendship with her and became a regular face on her show. Martha Stewart gave an interview to ABC in 2009 where she mocked Rachel's inability to bake, then added unflattering commentary about her most recent cookbook at the time, and none of it was subtle. A website called Rachael Ray Sucks, formerly operating under the name I Despise Rachael Ray, was built specifically as a gathering place for people who wanted to document their contempt for her, which is a level of dedicated hostility that most public figures never experience. None of that stopped her, but it also never fully went away, and it created a background noise around her career that she had to navigate for decades. The cookbook ghostwriting accusations landed harder than most of the criticism because they struck at authenticity, which carries real weight in the food world. Rachel had authored more than 20 cookbooks by the time the story broke, published hundreds of recipes across Food Network, her personal website, and her magazine, and the sheer volume made outside help not just plausible, but logical. A 2012 New York Times piece titled, "I Was a Cookbook Ghostwriter," named her among the celebrity chefs accused of not writing their own material, and the internet treated it as confirmation of everything her detractors had been saying. On her show, she pushed back, insisting she carved out time to write at home, while also acknowledging she received help with organization and finishing touches. Bobby Flay told the Today Show he had personally watched her write during production, which helped, but the story had already done what stories like that do. Her public loyalty to Mario Batali cost her in a different and more lasting way. When multiple women came forward in 2017, accusing Batali of serious misconduct, Rachel chose to remain in contact with him, and by 2019, she was telling NPR that she had always been treated fairly in their industry. That last part landed badly. Saying she had always been treated fairly in the same breath as defending a colleague credibly accused of treating women unfairly read as tone-deaf at best, and the backlash from that interview followed her for some time. The family tragedy from November 2013 never fully left the public record either. Rachel's aunt Geraldine Dominica Scuderi, 77 years old at the time, had been house-sitting at Rachel's property when she went outside to feed the birds and locked herself out. She tried breaking a window and every other option she could think of, but nothing worked, and she collapsed in the cold. She was discovered the following day and did not survive. Certain family members directed blame at Rachel, with one cousin claiming the aunt had never been given her own key. Rachel's absence from the funeral, explained by her shooting schedule on one of her shows, drove the tension higher, and while her brother defended her publicly, the damage was real and the grief was not something any television segment could address. What followed in the years after reads like a list that almost defies belief. A 2008 surgery to remove a benign cyst from her throat set off cancer rumors that her representatives had to publicly walk back. She was mugged twice in a single week during the 1990s in New York City. A fire in 2020 destroyed her Adirondack home entirely. Hurricane Ida in 2021 heavily damaged the rebuilt residence before the renovation dust had even settled. Lawsuits targeting her Nutrish pet food line claimed the product contained weed killer and dog DNA, allegations that were eventually dismissed, but not before generating significant press. Through every one of those events, Rachael Ray kept filming, kept publishing, kept moving. John Cusimano entered her life in 2001 at a birthday party thrown by a mutual friend, and he likes to describe the scene by saying the room was full of tall people and the two of them spotted each other across a crowd of knees, which works as a story partly because both of them are notably short. Rachel stands 5 feet 3 inches and John is exactly 1 inch taller. 2 years after that birthday party, they got married at Castello di Vicarello in Tuscany, a setting chosen specifically because of the deep affection both of them carry for Italy, a country they have returned to throughout their marriage while dividing their time between Europe and their Adirondack home. In September 2024, Rachael launched a podcast called I'll Sleep When I'm Dead, and she has been using it to say things publicly that she had kept private for years. The very first episode included an admission that she does not trust quiet people, especially in conflict. And from there, she walked her guest through the mechanics of her marriage in a way that raised eyebrows. She and John argue loudly, regularly, and without apparent concern for decorum. And Rachael's position is that the screaming is not a problem, but simply their language. When the argument ends, no one apologizes with words. She kisses him on the head or pats his back, and the conversation moves on. Two people who have been together for more than 20 years and never found a quieter way to resolve a disagreement. But the relationship has held. The tabloids tried to unravel it more than once. Claims circulated that Cusimano had cheated on Rachael with two different women, and a separate story alleged he had carried on a multi-year affair with a woman from Florida whom he had met in New York in 2000, with the story including claims of financial arrangements and substance use. Rachael's response to these allegations in a 2007 People magazine interview was to laugh, genuinely laugh, before noting that if the stories were accurate, the fictional count of women in her husband's life would actually be 6. She followed that by saying that since the wedding, she has known exactly where John sleeps every single night. Whether that reads as dismissal or confidence probably depends on how much you want to believe her. The decision not to have children came from Rachael's own clear-eyed assessment of what she could and could not give. She works at a pace that leaves very little room for anything else, and she has been honest enough to say publicly that on some days she feels like she is failing her pit bull Isabu simply because she is away so much. Trying to raise a child while running a television show, a magazine, a production company, a pet food brand, and a podcast was not a trade-off she was willing to make. And John, who spends a significant amount of his own time fronting his band Cringe, appears to share that assessment. He came into the marriage as a practicing entertainment lawyer in New York, and Rachael has credited that background repeatedly as one of the foundations her career was built on, calling it the smartest decision she ever made. The professional record she built across all of those years is long enough that even listing it takes some time. 30-Minute Meals ran on Food Network for 11 seasons between 2001 and 2012. Her personal talk show, Rachael Ray, filmed in New York from September 2006 and ran until May 2023. A 17-year stretch she chose to end herself before launching Free Food Studios, her own production company. Her magazine, Every Day with Rachael Ray, launched in October 2005 through the Reader's Digest Association before moving to the Meredith Corporation in 2011. She served as a spokesperson for Nabisco starting in November 2006 and for Dunkin' Donuts beginning in March 2007, appearing in their advertising campaigns and on product packaging. West Point Home rolled out a bed and bath line designed by her in February 2007, which expanded within months to include a product called the M-Pin, a kitchen towel that doubled as an oven mitt, inspired by the towel she wore over her shoulder on camera. Her Nutrish pet food line, born from her love of Isabu and structured to benefit the Rachael Ray Foundation, which aids animals in need, launched in July 2008, despite the legal trouble that came later. She appeared as a fictionalized version of herself in the 2016 Gilmore Girls revival, voiced a character on Nickelodeon's Butterbeans Cafe in 2019, competed against Guy Fieri on Food Network's Rachel vs. Guy Celebrity Cook-Off, and made a cameo in the 2024 season finale of The Curse alongside Emma Stone and Nathan Fielder. And in 2007, the Oxford American College Dictionary officially added EVOO as an entry, a direct result of Rachael putting the abbreviation for extra virgin olive oil into daily circulation. 20-plus years of television, cookbooks, endorsements, personal setbacks, public controversies, and one very loud marriage later, Rachael Ray is still standing, and she is still herself, which is either the most obvious conclusion or the most interesting one, depending on how you have been paying attention.